I would actually tell them, try to think how to give teachers more freedom, because a lot of teachers leave teaching profession because of it's too constrained, and they understand they can't really influence anything, they cannot change anything. So, and that leads to frustration and leaving, the school and education system. So I think try to give even maybe a little bit of freedom to teachers will first of all get new and more motivated teachers, but it will also motivate existing teachers, because it's more interesting to work when you can actually change something or influence or implement your ideas. I think this would be the main advice, because there are a lot of really creative and intelligent people working in education, but they are really constrained by the system.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of TomoClub's podcast. We are spotlighting leaders that are doing some fantastic work in the field of edtech, and as such are adding tremendous value to our community. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, Andrei Voronine, who is the founder and CEO of NYsKOOL. Welcome to the show, Andrei.
Thank you.
So before we begin, let us get an understanding of who Andrei is, what do you do, and what is one thing that is very close to you that you feel is worth sharing with our audience?
Okay. Yeah, I was an entrepreneur all my life. So I started several businesses. My main business was corporate travel. We were exclusive partner of American Express Travel in Russia, and the business grew to $100 million. So it's quite a substantial business with 500 employees. But I always, on the side, try to do other startups. I did a concierge service for luxury travel. I did a Ibiza.ru project about the Ibiza island for Russians. I did, it was not my own startup, but I did start an insurance company. So I did quite a lot. And at some point I recognized that, the businesses are essentially all the same. You have the systems, you have the process, you have the vision, the strategy, but, that's what I learned. And that's why, actually I had the idea of creating a school, and my daughter started a school. And she actually started in one of the top British schools, which, really prestigious, lots of football players, famous football players, kids go there. So it is a really good school, but traditional. But then I immediately saw the downsides of the traditional education. And that's why I had this idea of creating NYsKOOL.
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing about your business. I'm going to expand on what you just said. You have been building businesses across Europe, specifically the American Express travel business, which grew to $100 million plus venture. So for school leaders and educators who often feel constrained by the system, by the bureaucracy, and also about the mindset. So I'm very curious to understand, what was the mindset shift that made you believe this entrepreneurial thinking you mentioned would actually work inside education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed, the education systems are really bureaucratic and really rigid and almost impossible to change. And the problem when you do a new idea, a new startup, if you try to fit within the system, then you cannot create anything which is really breakthrough, and that would probably just kill the idea. So. What I kind of learned while doing the other businesses, at some point you just ignore the system, and then you kind of deal with it later. Even I was told by some people who in education in both Spain and Portugal, they say if you come with your idea and try to get the school license, you will never get it. But if you already have school operational, they will probably give it to you. So sometimes it's another way around. And actually, I read about Revolut Bank, and it was really inspiring, because banking is even more bureaucratic and kind of regulated. But what they did, they operated for many years just with one Latvian IBAN. And I know, for example, in Spain, the banks really resisted. Utility companies didn't accept the IBAN. They really try not to let Revolut in Spain, and now it's already number 4 in Spain. And they worked for many years they could not get any license in any European countries, and they were already operating in Europe. So I think that was for me really inspiring, because I thought we kind of do the school version of Revolut. And that's what we did. We did register in the UK, where online schools don't require accreditation. We started working in Spain and Portugal, where kind of the system is not so rigid as, for example, Germany and Sweden. Germany and Sweden will probably be closed within a week. But in Spain and Portugal, they kind of understand that they need new types of school. They need new types of school. They don't fit within the system, but they sort of let the schools operate. That's why we started in Portugal and Spain. So you always need to find the way around the system, because if you try to fit, it will kill the new idea.
That's a fantastic lesson, because when we come from different communities and we try to just fit in, it's just not enough to be adaptable, but we also have to understand the local culture, the local requirements, what is the mindset that people bring in, because school nowadays has a lot of different programs, and there is just as many choices. Perhaps you could consider or compare it with any other field, like an automobile. Earlier, there were just quite a few that you had to choose from, but nowadays, given the vast improvements in technology, which I feel is also coming to our schools very fast, I think what you said is something that clearly resonates with what we do at TomoClub as well, because we just do not adapt straightforward. We also understand and comply with all the local regulations and the frameworks that are already in place, so that there is no paradigm shift that is very suddenly put on the students as well as the parents. So that brings me to a little bit deeper about your own education, because I understand, rather, I know that you have done your MBA from INSEAD and you have scaled companies, and you were also part of the Berkeley's CTO course. And perhaps you have gotten the access to tools that most educators would never have, or perhaps would not even understand that there are such tools to really gain your expertise from. So, from a systems thinking point of view and a rapid iteration that you have done across different companies, what skills do you see out of those, both from your mainstream MBA as well as the additional programs that you have gone? Should schools be teaching? And specifically, I'm coming to NYsKOOL. So, what are these thinking skills that you teach, and what is the impact that you're seeing? Like,
Yeah, I think a lot of schools are started by the teachers, and teachers they don't have this experience, as you say. So that's why I think sometimes you need an outsider who come and who think differently. And I think that the main skill is which I think the educators miss, is the working in uncertainty. Because when you create a startup, a new idea, you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes you try this and doesn't work, then you try that. And I already see, even like working with the teachers, that they get really frustrated by constant changes. Because, in a normal school life, you have your school calendar, you have your week calendar, it just doesn't change through the year. Like everything is exactly the same. And for many teachers, year after year, it goes exactly the same. So I think working in uncertainty is like really important. And also, if you know that you're building something big, because we're working on building a global school. So even when we're small, even when we have 20 students in the beginning, we already start building the processes and thinking like, well, how will they work when we have 2,000 students? Will this process work? Is it scalable? Is it not scalable? So you, even from the very beginning, you need to think about each process and each implementation idea is like, like how it will work. For me also, I think personally, what I recognize that, to do a startup, you need to be like a jack of all trades. And, luckily I've been in all areas of business. So like people were even asking me before, like, what's your specialization? I'm like, I don't know, human resources, operations, finance, IT, everything. And now, like, I started a new school as thinking like about the big business, like many companies do. I hired somebody to be head of education, head of sales, head of marketing, head of operations. And then I recognized that I had to do it myself, everything, because with such amount of uncertainty in the beginning, it's very difficult for other people to like work on the fly and try to recognize what to do. I think, and that's what we also try to, like, we adapt Finnish methodology in NYsKOOL, and Finns believe that life skills are as important, at least, as academic education. So we in our school, the students, they run these 4-week cycles. We call them for sprints, like within the cycle. So they choose the project, and it's usually like, they need to identify a real life problem, then they need to do research, then they do the prototype, and then they present for everybody. So it's like they learn all the skills which are necessary for real life. And that's, I think, the most important, is like working uncertainty, working with teams, and and being able to quickly change when necessary.
I totally hear you, and I definitely get working in uncertain situations, because we know what is going on in the current political landscape across the world. More so, what I feel is uh, the very skill of adaptability, collaboration, teamwork is as applicable to our educators as it is important for our students as well. And what I feel is working with uncertainty would then probably give rise to working in a very dynamic environment. So coming to these skills that you mentioned, and in particular with New School, what specific skill do you find the educators are most uncomfortable with, and what are your tips for the educators to overcome this feeling of discomfort when it comes to the dynamic environments that they are expected to teach?
I think it's this quick changes, quick and sudden changes, where because they get really frustrated because they're used to like systematic and structured life. So I'm trying to explain them that this is the nature of startup, and if you're building something new, you have to change. Because like last year we started with one curriculum which we thought would be our major curriculum for everyone, and everybody hated it. So like in October, just 1 month after into the school year, we completely changed the curriculum, and everybody has to adjust to a new one. And these things, they have to happen. And I try to explain this is the mindset. If you're building something new, if you don't want to build something new, work in traditional school, where everything's predictable. But if you want to build something new, you need to be ready for changes. That's what I'm trying to sort of to teach the teachers.
And are the teachers open to receiving these tips from you? And what do you think would make it easier for them to adapt to these changes?
What we find out now, like first of all, we tend to attract the teachers who don't like traditional schools, and then they try to find some other role model. But even for them, if they have experience in traditional schools, very difficult to readjust and to change. So what we find now that the best teachers who work for us is somebody who worked has obviously education as a teacher, worked as a teacher, but also worked outside of education system. For example, somewhere in sales, in startups, in marketing, anywhere, because they bring this experience of multitasking, changes, and being more agile environment than in traditional school. So that kind of people fit better with New School.
Absolutely. So I think giving them the right opportunities and making them understand the purpose of building a new age school, I think that serves as a very great starting point. And I would just like to rewind our conversation to two things that I noticed you mention about New School. One is you said this is a completely new age school, which is set apart from a traditional school. And second was you mentioning it as a startup. So I'm very curious and very interested to understand what was the approach you took while building New School? Was it a more of a startup based approach? And if so, what assumptions about traditional schooling did you just throw or set aside first?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are two main things which we besides the Finnish part, which I already talked about a little bit, because I was that's really inspiring the way education works in Finland. So that's one of the most of like fundamental things in New School we try to do. But two other things. One was that I actually always quote one of the fathers I talked to. He said, only in school they believe that 25 kids of exactly the same age have exactly the same interests and abilities. And I was actually thinking where else you would find, like, for example, 25 or 30 people doing exactly the same thing through the whole day. And they're told constantly what they're supposed to do right now. Military and prisons. So unfortunately, I think the system in the traditional schools where they're told every second what to do and they work only as a group is outdated. So what we started to do, we started to immediately like working on individual learning plans for each child. And in traditional system, these individual plans exist, but usually for kids who are struggling. And they see like teachers try to help them to sort of to grow and to reach the minimum level. But what we recognized, I take my own daughter as an example. When she was in this British school, she was about 2 years ahead in mathematics. So she was really bored, and she already knew like square roots and everything, and they were like dividing 36 apples to 6 boxes in the class. I tried to talk to the teacher, but teacher said I can't do anything. There's a class, there's the curriculum, they all study the same curriculum. We cannot just take her out and make her study mathematics individually, like for 2 grades up. In New School, she's now in grade 6 technically, but she's doing mathematics and English from grades 7 and 8. And then she decided herself that she wanted to do chemistry, physics, political geography from grade 9, which being in grade 6. But that's fine. As long as you fulfill the curriculum of your grade, you can do whatever you want. And she decided to study French, for example, so we included it into her individual learning plan. So when we talk about also challenging, because in traditional schools they don't really challenge the kids who are ahead. They focus on the kids who are behind. So what we do, like even with, again, my own daughter, she's 2 grades ahead in mathematics, but I still tell her, in tests you don't really have a lot of progress in the last 6 months. So we try to help those who are behind, but also challenge those who are ahead. So basically individual learning plans, and that also means the classes, because we don't have this kind of fixed groups. So one child can study mathematics with one group, English with another group, Portuguese with another group. So we also have this, like kind of fluid teams, so to say, which again kind of remind of the grown-up life, because you do one project with one team, another project with another team, which is very typical. But that makes the school setup really complex, because it's pretty much like every kids have their own like plan, and also we have to mix these kids with different kids. So this is the number one. Number two is hybrid, because when my daughter studied this British school, I was traveling quite a lot, and that was pre-pandemic. And I believe that traveling and seeing other cultures is as important as the academic education. So I thought, like, why can't the child switch to online for 1 week and then come back and rejoin the school? So that was the concept which we started to work from the very beginning. So first of all, the families can move around and the kids can stay in the same school, because they all studied together from different locations. And we already had cases where somebody from Lisbon would come to Barcelona for 1 week, and kids immediately got in, because they already knew kids of their own age and they already knew the system. So we make it very easy to switch between online and in person. And we have students who study 100% online. We have students who go like to normal school 5 days a week. Some go 3 days a week. Sometimes they go to travel for 1 month and they switch to online. So we give all this flexibility to families. And of course, post-pandemic, it became really important, because the schools don't really allow this normally. So this, I think, the two main things is, our families and students, they're not tied to location on the school calendar. They can travel anytime they want. And the second, like, we really individualize, because now all the companies, all the services are getting personalized, but not in education. In education, they still do 25 kids do exactly the same, the same stuff through the day. So I think that's the two main things which I wanted to change.
Thank you for sharing so much about what the model stands for. And I definitely see the need for having personalized learning, because not all of us are built the same, and our capabilities and interests are varied, diverse, and perhaps even influenced by the location, as you rightfully mentioned. So this brings me to my next question, which I must imagine, like, working in a very dynamic environment is not just easy, it is complex as well. It has a lot of different cogs that have to come together, and you'll have to coordinate with different teams at different setups. So what do you think is one aspect where you found that this just does not work for us? And what did you do to course correct that particular part?
I think this is like what our physical locations we call learning hubs. And we started to call teachers who work in the learning hubs hub teachers, but then we recognize it's misleading for everybody. It's misleading for teacher candidates, because they assume that they would be teaching, and for parents, because they assume that these teachers will be teaching, and for students as well. So it's like it was misleading for everybody. And as I said, like I think what we made a mistake in the beginning, we tried to get traditional teachers with solid teaching experience, but for them it was very difficult to adapt to this role, because all the kids are studying different stuff. So you need to, maybe helping one kid, and another kid will come and say he cannot log in, and then need to remember that the third kid will need to join the lesson. This multitasking, which didn't really work with the traditional teachers. That's why I say we now try to find people who have outside of the school experience as well. That was and also we started to call them learning coaches rather than hub teachers, because that's more what they're doing. Their job is to inspire and help to get things done.
It's very interesting to know that you are reframing the entire role itself. calling them from a teacher, moving them towards more of a coaching role. I think that brings in a lot of curiosity. And you also have somebody who is bought in energetically to the system and is not simply comparing with what a traditional system does. And that is very key in understanding how a dynamic environment works, and specifically in an education system that is still dominated by traditional rules or systems that was developed pre-AI era. I definitely see the need for bringing in thinkers, coaches who have a question mindset, who can question the process, help the students be curious, find the answers, and learn and grow with them. I think that is something fantastic that you mentioned, which brings me to something that you have said in the past, where you said one of the three keys to inspiring your team or being a great CEO is to be adaptable and collaborative yourself. So if the leader does not lead from the front, there is no way you can expect the team to just follow you blindly. So how do you build and inspire a team around an education mission that is as dynamic as it can get, and that is something which changes perhaps year to year? And how do you put forth this to somebody who is a school leader, like a principal or superintendent or an edtech founder themselves?
Mhm. Yeah, I do believe actually when I was interviewed for the CEO job of like of insurance company, setting up the insurance company, I was talking to my future boss, and he asked me like, "But how are you going to build insurance company where you've never been into insurance business?" And I said, "I think all the businesses are the same. You basically need to understand the strategy. You need to find good team, and you need to inspire and motivate the team. Then you can work in any industry, and that's what I believe. And I think for me, it was first of all, I think again here we follow the Finnish methodology, because Finns, they give a lot of freedom to teachers. In most of like other school systems, the teachers have to follow exactly like the students, step by step instructions, processes, and nothing. I cannot really change anything. But in Finland, they give a lot of freedom to teachers. They say, okay, you need to teach the curriculum, but you can do it any way you like. You can get any books you like, any tools you like, any games you like. So you can do it like the way you can do it better. And I think that inspires teachers quite a lot. But also, for me was very useful, I managed IT, like software developers for 7 years. And I learned a lot from them, because in software development, the way they work, there's no boss, so to say. The boss job is more like facilitator. So, and the team is making all the decisions, which for me was really interesting, because of course I also come from traditional corporate background where you're the boss, you tell everybody, and everything goes through you. But here, like they have we have morning check-ins where everybody can basically share what they're doing today, what they've done yesterday. So the whole team is synchronized, and also even like people asking me like but who is the head of education? I will say like this is our collective mind. So all of us were the head of education, and I think this makes people curious, and also they understand they can change stuff. And I think that's what really really good for motivation, where people can say like I'm really impressed that everybody listens to me, and actually my opinion can change the course of how the school is being built. So that's, I think, very important, is to give people freedom, and also try to work in this agile environment like software companies do.
Absolutely, I totally agree, because it is very motivating to see if someone in a leadership position actually listens to you, takes your advice, and
Yeah.
starts working on them to see if it really results in the outcome that is desirable or not. I think having this fundamental mindset where you're open to understanding the views of your team members, specifically the educators, and promoting their coaching mindset is something that is fantastically done by NYsKOOL. So my follow-up question would be, how would you translate the same advice if you were to meet a school principal or an education leader who is perhaps coming in from a traditional school system?
I would actually tell them, try to think how to give teachers more freedom, because a lot of teachers leave teaching profession because of it's too constrained. and they understand they can't really influence anything, they cannot change anything. So, and that leads to frustration and leaving, like the school and education system. So I think try to give even maybe a little bit of freedom to teachers will first of all get like new and more motivated teachers, but it will also motivate existing teachers, because it's more interesting to work when you can actually change something or influence or like implement your ideas. I think this would be the main advice, because there are a lot of really creative and intelligent people work in education, but they are really constrained by the system.
That's a wonderful advice and something which is very actionable. And I think it does not really take much effort and time to at least spare a few moments to think of freeing up a teacher's space, or probably reducing their after school work burden so that they actually have time to focus on what they do best, which is to teach. So, having said that, when I look at education globally, and through the lens of someone who has been across multiple countries, multiple cultures, and somebody who has dealt with different educational systems, what do you think is the one single most important thing a school leader, both in a traditional system as well otherwise, should start thinking differently? Not probably in the future, but right now, what is one thing that you see is an actionable item for any school leader, irrespective of the education system they are in?
Yeah, I think the most important is to teach life skills, but also what we do and what I advise to all the schools do is to try to replicate the real life. Because the only way for the students to get ready for real life is to actually practice real life skills in the school. So, for example, again, in our school, what we do, like, because they all have different learning plans, so they have different tasks, they have lessons at different times. So, what they do in the morning, what most of the adults do, like get to work and you understand, okay, I have 3 meetings today which I need to join, and I have 15 items on my task list, and you plan your day. For example, even this planning of the day doesn't exist in schools, because you know the schedule, you know where your breaks, and you know like all your lessons, so you don't need to think and plan. And also, I think because the most successful companies are global now, they need somehow to bring this diversity, because people who, like, I can see in Spain, in traditional Spanish school, they only deal with Spanish people, they only deal with the kids of their age, so when they get out of the school, they get completely lost on how to do. So what we also try to do, and that's why we build this multi-location space, and we tend to also attract traveling families, multinational families. So, and they all work together. So like there will be kids from Spain joining with the kids from Portugal, or a kid from Australia joining to the lesson. So they already deal with this global mindset. And even like, as I was it's quite funny that we're talking to you, that we have one teacher from India, and when I was talking to one American parent, she said, like, yeah, but it's very difficult to understand him. I said, like, but you need to learn it, because what if he's going to work in IT company where most of the people are from India now? So you have to learn the accent, like American, Russian, British, Indian, whatever, Chinese accent. So that's also skills, because but it's not just the accent, but there's also different mentalities, of course, because of course we're all very different, but you need to learn how to work with different people. So I think trying to sort of to build this global mindset and give real life skills, like planning, being responsible, I think that's very important.
And this is a fantastic advice, and I totally resonate with the adapting capability, not just within the system, but also across the world, because technology is just making the world smaller and smaller. So you're absolutely spot on in saying that we have to have a global mindset. Last but not the least, for all our young listeners, our students that are listening in today, and if they had 1 hour probably next week to work on something, what would your suggestion be for our students listening today?
I think we have to at least mention AI, because a lot of educators are scared about AI, and I can totally see it, because now we don't even give the kids to write essay like on the computer, because they can do it in 2 minutes with the ChatGPT. So what we try to do, so when they do the project, of course they use ChatGPT, and that's fine to do it for research. My daughter even say, old people use Google, young people use ChatGPT. for learning. But as long as it's a research, as long as they like find useful information, but then when they present, we ask them, but what do you think? Why do you think is important? Why do you think, this has been done like this? So you need to assume that with AI, of course, they will get all the information they want to, but making them think and think critically, I think that's very important, as to how to learn, how to find out the information which is true or not, first of all, but then also have your own opinion, which is very important.
That is a very valid advice, because I had this interesting moment when I met a few third graders in school. And when the teacher asked how many of them used AI, you would be surprised to know almost 95% of the class raised their hand. But when we asked what sort of an activity they were using AI for, the entire adults that were present in the classroom were very surprised to note that most of them were doing it for seeking therapy. Most of them were doing it for doing their homework. So it is very apt that you mentioned that students have the every right to use AI, but it has to be in a controlled manner where they get the right guidance and not something that they do on their own. And it is also very important to stress on the need to add what they think, right? Because that is what makes it personal. Otherwise, it's just whatever you put in comes out, and there is no way for anybody to just, verify the authenticity of the information. So it is very apt that, there is a guided system for the students to use AI in the right sense. And as you said, the analogy was so apt. Old people, all the older generations started using Google to search and get their things going, and this generation kind of have AI to do that for them. So the only thing that is left for us as educators is to offer them the guidance and see that it is being used in an ethical sense, and help them understand the biases, the negativities that come associated with any technology for that matter, not just AI, right? So that is a very suitable advice. So to close things off, we are in the world of AI. There is a lot of advancements going on, and the technology is changing faster than we can ever imagine. So what are your closing thoughts about having AI in education? And as an alternate edtech service provider, how do you see that becoming a part of a system such as NYsKOOL?
I actually quote in this situation of the founder of the Khan Academy, which is quite famous, and he said, he presented the AI which they use in the Khan Academy, and he said, like the ultimate goal for education would be for every student to have their personal tutor with absolutely personalized like tutoring in education, but also for every teacher to have a personal assistant who will take all the technical work away from them so they can focus on thinking. And I do believe this is the future for AI in education, is to basically make it completely personalized and get the best information they can get out of there. But as you said, it needs to be done in controlled manner. They need to learn how to do it. They need to understand, like think critically. But I think AI, it's quite funny. I saw like an article that in the 60s, I think the teachers were protesting against calculators in the schools. So it's not new. So I think, you need to accept that AI is here, but we need to find the best use. And I think the best use is personalization for everyone.
Absolutely. And I do find it funny because the analogy again is spot on. Banning AI would probably be similar to, if you would have banned calculators in the 90s, because it's more or less doing some of the similar tasks. And I totally agree. AI is not a threat by itself. It's rather the ignorance of the resourcefulness and the right guidance on how to use it, which becomes a threat. And on that note, I really thank you, Andrei, for taking this time and giving us some actionable tips and pointers to work on. I'm sure our audience would definitely find this episode useful. So on that note, this is Shreyas, your host from TomoClub, signing off. Stay safe, and we will be back with one more guest and lots of actionable tips for you to take note of. Until then, take care, stay safe.
Thank you.